Welcome to the Soul Canvas podcast. This is your place to be possible. Each week, I get the great honor of having conversations with dear friends, world experts on the life that's possible when we say yes. Yes to travel, adventure, healing, and this week, yes to self-love. My guest this week is Barry Selby, who is a masterful relationship expert, best-selling author, inspirational speaker, podcaster, and spiritual guide. Barry is a passionate champion for the divine feminine while honoring and owning his masculine leadership. Barry is known to his clients as the Love Doctor, with 40 years investment in personal development and training, including a master's degree in spiritual psychology. I am thrilled. Barry and I have only recently met. I cannot wait for this conversation today. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for the invitation. And I'm looking forward to this exploration as well. So,
yes. Well, I want to be able to give some context to my listeners / viewers on how we met in the first place, because I think it plays into this conversation about, where this conversation of self-love comes up and self-respect, self-trust that I read about in the materials about you and how much you honor those things. I was with my friend Jennifer Luddington. She was asking about my my dating life recently, and because I hadn't seen her in a while. And I said, I'm doing my thing and I'm not really meeting the people that I want to meet. And, I'm still doing my thing. She said, oh, Barry, I think you should meet my friend Barry. Barry lives all the way across the country, but one never knows. Barry's done a lot of, self-work and personal development and all that, and you all should meet. And then, of course, we did. We got on video chat. And what was so remarkable to me, Barry, is that, first of all, and Jennifer shared this with me, you led with a question for her about whether or not I was someone who had done personal work, which is so unusual. First of all, that question comes, right, as kind of a top of the list thing, and that we were both so willing to be on a video chat with each other just to say hello and to meet in the first place. How was that experience for you?
Very similar in a way, because it was out of the blue to me, because as much as Jennifer and I know each other virtually because we haven't never met in person,
Yeah.
she was like asking, am I open to meeting someone? I said, sure. Because I've been single for quite a long time. And yes, I talk about relationships and love in my work, but I haven't felt the drive that I must find somebody. Way back when I last had a breakup, I may have had that for a while, but that sort of dissipated as I realized the work was inward anyway.
Yeah.
Well, realized again the work was inward anyway. And so the conversation was totally open to meet, open to discover, open to, because as Jennifer said to me, was a similar thing, was about there's definitely something where I think you two should meet. And it wasn't like, oh, I think you'd be soulmates. It was nothing like that. It was just like, you should have a conversation.
Yeah.
And that was, and yes, top of mind for me is someone who's done their own work, whether it's through therapy or internal process transformation, or it could even be healing of trauma, things that happen that people change from, because so many people, unfortunately, my view is, tend to spend their time being numb to what's going on inside.
Yeah.
And so when they're with somebody else, that numbness also it tends to bleed into the relationship as well. So that's one reason I put top of list. And it's funny because I've seen a lot of my friends post recently, women have posted recently on social media, how their primary attraction to a man, like the sexiest thing a man can say to her, is that they're in therapy.
Yeah.
Which is something that wasn't put on front of mind for up until maybe the last few years.
True.
But it's reassuring that people are looking, well, at least the women I've been seeing, I've been putting that in the list as well. And I do as well, because I've been on this journey for a long time. And thankfully, I didn't have a major challenging life growing up, but I still had issues. And we all do. We all have stuff we get imprinted by, whatever happens. So that's why it's top of my list. And so it was nice to meet somebody who's done their own work as well.
Right back at you. When did the personal, like the intentional personal work start for you? Why?
Well, this is the funny part of the story. Well, one of the funny parts. My first exploration and exposure to the personal development field was in the end was late 1984, so 40
Mm.
years ago. Yeah, doing math right. And I just come to this moved to the States at this point. I was in my well, somewhere in my 20s, I'll keep it that vague. And I was at that point just got my green card. I've been working in computer programming, which is one of my previous careers. I've had a few. And a guy I was working
Same
with,
here. Go ahead.
say again?
I said same here. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's the way life is. So a friend of mine who I was working with in freelancing aerospace at the time we were working in came into the coffee shop where we met in the mornings every morning for coffee before we go to work. And he looked like he was like worn out, like he'd been somewhere the night before. Like, did you go partying? Did you go get drunk? What happened? This is the 80s, so people do stuff like that. And he said, no, he went to the seminar. And I literally said to him, what the hell is a seminar? I had no idea what he was talking about.
Hmm.
And the way he described it, he said, it was some good information, some cool people, and some cute women. And I said, where do I sign? And that's the way I got into the personal development field. And it was the perfect
Yeah.
entry because it was the cute women that got me first, but then it was some cool people and some good information that really followed up with that. And that was really, he wasn't wrong by any means.
Yeah.
But the reality was, once I got in the door, and it was probably the third, it was a 5 day seminar, started on Wednesday night and goes through the weekend. And the first few nights were like provocative, but the Saturday morning, something happened that changed my whole perspective of life.
Hmm.
Process was done where it was a conversation about of hiding, and we're doing dyads. And the
Hmm.
guy, and we were supposed to pick somebody, and I'm skipping so much information to get to this point,
Hmm.
is the fact that it was like pick somebody you had the most challenge with in the room. And so I picked the person I felt the most distance from, this guy who was real like um, bodybuilder type, tan, leather jacket. He had all the push key tag came from his pocket. It was all the accoutrements of the like together man, which I didn't feel I was. So I
Hmm.
picked it because of that. And the diet was all about hiding. And how do we not hide? And it was such a revealing, it's literally revealing experience.
Yeah.
And then the way the seminars were built, they have a song afterwards that plays. And it was just the words of the song just got me in the heart, and I was already open, and I was in tears.
Yeah.
And I'm an English guy, so generally very reserved and stoic, not very emotional. And like, what is going on?
Hmm.
And that was kind of that was really the spark of the first like inkling that this is where I want to spend a lot of my time.
Hmm.
The transformation and the revealing and the humbling experience was powerful for me.
Yeah. I think I shared with you when we first met that similarly, time-wise, 39 years ago, I walked into my first AA meeting. I
Hmm.
was just shy of 24, and the power of a room full of people who could automatically see more for me than I could see for myself,
Yeah.
even while I was shaking and crying and puking and like I was I was a mess. Um, help me find a seat. I mean, it was dramatic in that respect, but I could feel that. I could see this sign that said, you never have to be alone again, which I was sure meant for everybody else, but not for me. I mean, that was just the state that I was in at that time.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
since then, having experienced personal development in so many other aspects, I worked with Tony Robbins, for his company for a while when I first started my coaching business, et cetera, et cetera. Have always, since that time, I've had a coach of some kind in these areas, along with therapy and such, because I don't know about you, and I want to hear what you think about this.
Mhm.
I think that, first of all, this idea that I'm my own worst enemy, I think is trash. I'm not my own worst enemy. I'm actually my own best advocate when I have the right tools. I just don't
Yeah.
always have the right tools.
Right. That's
Yeah.
that is the challenge. Yeah. And that's the thing I had to learn myself was that because we unfortunately oftentimes take in what other people say about us as truth.
Hmm.
And I talk a lot about how we grow up because in a relationship conversation, a lot of stuff is about the patterns we pick up when we're kids without realizing we picked them up because they're unconscious.
Sure.
And oftentimes we're telling ourselves stuff that if we really listen closely, isn't our voice, it's one of our parents or somebody who grew up.
Hmm. That's
So
right.
you're so right on that because we oftentimes have to really listen closely and go, hang on, is that really true for me? Is that really my voice? Because oftentimes
Yeah.
it isn't. We just copied it and put it inside because we think that's the right thing to do. And to
Yeah.
really be your own best advocate, your own ally, your own cheering leader is something we all need to do, definitely. So that's a powerful shift to have.
And to have those environments, right? To have those environments like personal development rooms, AA rooms, therapy rooms, etc., where we can say what we think at the time is true about ourselves and have someone say, well, not yes, because you're, my friend, or no, because you're my mama, but maybe, like maybe not.
Well,
What if? How about? Yeah.
yeah, one of the biggest things though is also when we start saying things about ourselves that are negative, and our friends stop us. That's one of the biggest,
Mm,
because it's the thing is, yes, it's great to be affirmed, and for most people,
sure.
affirmation oftentimes feel like being egotistical. But when we fall into some self doubt, or some negative some negative self talk, like we're sharing with other people, and they catch it and stop us going
Mhm.
down that path, that's one of the biggest gifts we can give each other.
Yeah. So, when did you get on the path to coaching, working with, guiding people in this area of self-love?
It's something that I look back and I can see like hints and little highlights along my journey of where it showed up in different places. Oftentimes for me, it came up because I spent a lot of time out of relationship, and especially as I've gone further down the path, I really found the relationship with myself to become front and center as a primary focus, simply because it was the only relationship I had ultimately, and that wasn't like a default, but it's just like choose it consciously.
Mm,
And also being on this path for many years, I've always been um, the way I frame it is basically being a shoulder girls could cry on. When I was a teenager, that happened all the way through until current time. So I always had that gift inside of me. But in 2007, after a really bad breakup, and it was the third in a row the same thing happened, where that's where I got the clue. Oh, it's not about them; it's about me. One of the big
mm,
second piece was that she was kind enough to be blunt enough to read me the right act about what I did wrong, because my other girlfriends didn't. They were so nice; they didn't tell me. She did. As much as it hurt me, it was exactly what I needed to hear, because it shifted me out of my complacency and put me in a questioning mode. Because at this point in time, in 2007, I've been on this journey for, at that point, over 30 years, 20 years rather. So I had a certain level of self assumption that I knew what I was doing.
mhm,
But in the
mhm.
relationship, I still
What
messed
did she
up.
say? What, if you don't mind?
Basically, when she first met me, she'd seen me where I'd volunteered a lot of places, and I was in leadership roles. So she's really attracted to my leadership ability.
Yeah.
But that wasn't what I was doing in the relationship. I was very beta in the relationship, and I was basically being the passenger, letting her lead, because she was also very dynamic and very forceful,
Mhm,
and I was being very nice in quotes to let her lead, and I
mhm.
didn't take charge. And I didn't know at the time that I was missing a big piece of the puzzle for myself.
Yeah,
And shifting it slightly into the masculine and feminine conversation, which is what happened to me in 2007, is
sure.
I was led through prayer, through guidance, through somebody giving me some feedback, to some teachers that talked about the polarity of masculine and femininity, which I didn't even know at that point. Because
Mm,
I grown up with the belief system, as most men have, and a lot of women too, is that men were either nice guys or bad boys. And the nice guys were the ones that really cared, but were kind of wishy-washy.
mm,
Whereas the bad boys had like strong egos, and they're like, they were like getting things done, but they didn't take into account anybody else.
yeah.
And so that was the only two choices I knew I had, because growing up in my life, I didn't see any other models besides that. My dad was
Right.
much more the macho, not the extrovert macho, but the introvert macho, meaning he was very withheld and basically kept
Stoic.
himself, got things
Mm,
done. Yeah,
mhm.
the stoic and stiff upper lip type thing from England
Yeah,
was
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
in.
Mm,
And so I didn't have a model beyond that. So 2007, when I found these teachers, and I found several teachers after that, many people I love dearly, who really explained how masculinity and femininity work. And I realized that masculinity was the third choice beyond nice guy and bad boy that really fit me. And it
yeah,
was what I really understood. And so I've lived in that place for the last 15 years.
yeah. It took me a while after my divorce. I divorced in 2013 and I was married for 21 years.
Hmm.
Um, it took me a while, if I'm being perfectly honest about it, to own my part in what he had been trying to tell me for a long time.
Hmm.
Wonderful human, very compassionate, very lovely man. He kept saying, I don't think you're happy.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
Right? So, and I'm like, yes, I am. What else do I have to do to prove that? Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. And yet, because I didn't have the language to discern between happy and content until
Hmm.
after. what I
Yeah.
realized was I was very happy. We had a lovely home. We had our struggles financially, whatever. We great friends, lots of things that were going right, even when things were going perfectly horribly wrong with businesses and such. I was not content. And I didn't know how to voice that. I didn't know how to stand for that. I didn't know how to go after it in a way that wasn't like a fucking club.
Right.
Like, fine, I'll just go
Yep.
carve my own path because, that's just where I was. And that's hard to be married to. Now,
Hmm.
he can take his own part on his side, and I won't take his inventory in this podcast. Um, but I know that that was my part in, and it's been really a journey for me in the meantime, right? The 10, 11 years I've been divorced now to say, okay, like where am I in being able to communicate that to someone, not put it on them.
Hmm.
And this is where I'd like to kind of segue into this conversation about like we hear a lot about the divine feminine and masculine and the energies and all of that sort of, what does it mean? What does it mean?
It's maybe more than can fit in this time, but we'll cover
Yes,
it.
I know.
Broad stroke. Simply put, for me, masculinity and femininity are on a spectrum. So it's not one or the other. It's really about a place to be on a line where basically in the middle is kind of androgyny or no energy, whereas
Mm,
one end is feminine, one end is masculine. We reside generally towards one end of that spectrum or the other as mostly how we are in our lives. And it's not based upon gender or based on sexual preference. It's basically innately who you are because there are masculine men who are straight, there are masculine men who are gay, there are masculine women who are straight, and masculine women who are gay. Meaning that if
mhm.
you're masculine or feminine, it doesn't correlate. Generally speaking, though, in the population, masculinity tends to most men towards the masculine end of the spectrum, straight men. Most straight women tend towards the feminine end of the spectrum, but most of us have unfortunately had life impact on ourselves and the way we do things, where we shifted around on the spectrum to do things. Most
Mhm.
women, especially if they're entrepreneurs, if they're in business, if they're executives, have had to
Mhm.
adopt a masculine way of doing things to fit in the structure that is very masculine.
Yeah.
And so for most women, they either have lost touch with or have hidden or have disassociated from their feminine because they haven't had time to play with it. And most men, unfortunately, don't know how to make space that's safe enough for women to own their feminine, which is a whole other topic.
Mm.
Masculine and femininity in how they feel is masculinity is very directional, getting things done, getting make things happen. It's also about goal achievement and it's more linear, whereas femininity is more embracing everything.
Mm.
And the way that a couple of my teachers describe it is um, if you imagine like a flag waving, that's the feminine energy, it's movement, it's energy, it's flowing. The masculinity is the flag pole sustaining it.
Oh, wow. What a great metaphor, analogy.
I have a few of some of my teachers give me. Another one I can use, which I love as well, because it really fits, is um, I'm from which teacher told me this now. I'll come back to who it was because I have a few different teachers. But basically, imagine that because the masculine is very directional, getting things done, it
Mm.
doesn't necessarily reroute and change things very easily. It's like go for the goal, go for straight for the goal, and sometimes it's oblivious to anything else. That's one of the strengths and weaknesses of the masculinity.
Mm.
So if you imagine like these long shipping these cargo container ships that are like, they take 3 miles to turn. They're long, they're massive,
Yeah.
they move very ponderous, and they move very slowly. So they don't move very fast. The feminine energy is the ocean it sits on.
Mm.
The feminine energy is much bigger than the masculine energy in that sense. It's more turbulent. It's more movement oriented because the life itself is feminine.
Mm.
So the feminine is more powerful. Masculine is more strength. And it's interesting because there's power and strength are two different things in this context.
Sure, sure.
So how we function in the world is the masculine is more competitive, whereas the feminine is more collaborative.
Hmm.
There's lots of these it's like yin and yang in a way. They fit together different ways.
Yes,
And in sexual connection, masculine and feminine energy, the more extreme they are from each other, the more attraction there is.
sure. I can definitely know a time, particularly right after my divorce, that full on masculine, take care of
Hmm.
myself, get where I needed to go, no bullshit, let's go. Because
Yep.
it was survival, it was self-preservation. There's also, I think, I from speaking to so many of my female friends about feminine energy and coming from the trauma of not being safe when I was fully in my feminine energy, that the extreme of closing off from that for self-protection, and then coming into a relationship, my marriage, where I was perfectly safe, perfectly safe, to actually be more feminine than I probably allowed myself to be, because I didn't really know how. I knew how to protect myself. I knew how to get shit done, but then soften into things for a little while, but then divorce. And I was like, let's go to New York City. Let's go do that drive. What's been so interesting to me in the last 6 years, 5 years since I moved back to Florida is how different environments, opportunities, in my case, being back in Florida where there's a lot of water, to your point on that analogy, getting into art 2.5 years ago has put me so much more in touch with my feminine energy than anything has in so long. And I was looking for a relationship to do that. I'm sure you hear this from women that you work with who are like, find me the guy who, or the relationship who. And I don't think that's your job.
No, but it is my job to inform them of how best to be the most attractive partner, so to speak. And it's not about makeup, it's about who they are inside.
Sure.
Which is why we talk about the self-love piece a lot in my work too. Because we are unfortunately oftentimes tuned to look externally for fulfillment versus starting from within.
Right.
And like you were saying about when you found safety in the relationship to be yourself, the biggest challenge I think we face, especially for women, is trust. Because they haven't had a safe place to land with a man. And a man isn't necessarily a safe place to land with a woman either, frankly.
Right.
Where it's okay to be ourselves and not feel like we have to prove something to each other or do something or hold ourselves back or put up a certain front, or all these things we think we need to do to fit into a partnership.
So what do you suggest for our listeners, viewers of this episode, who are interested in developing a greater sense of self-love, a greater level of that, I guess, if you would call it? Where do they start?
The simplest way I said to start is to be willing to look at yourself honestly in the mirror. Just to look inside in a sense, be with yourself, and to start taking, talking about your terms about being in 12-step programs, but take an inventory in a sense, not necessarily mechanically like that, but just the idea of is make a list of your positive qualities, honestly, because we all have them. We may pretend we don't, but we all have them. Starting from there.
I'm delightful, so that's not, I'm kidding.
Right. Well, but that's the thing is starting from that place, though, is it gives us a building block, a starting point. Because self-love, there's a lot of teaching about self-love out in the world. And I did for a while just say, if you just put your hand over your heart and love yourself, that's a great starting point. It is. Sure. And there's more to do, because for most of us, we have belief systems and, again, voices, like I said earlier, and rules we carry around ourselves that will undermine that loving of ourselves. Because in my self-love works with people, I often talk about our self-relationship, which includes, self-support, self-honesty, self-trust, self-esteem, self-care, all these different pieces that make up who we are as a self-person. So the self-love journey, self-love process is something that takes time, because it's really coming back to a place of a healthy relationship with ourselves. Many people, including myself, I know for sure, oftentimes thought we would be happier when we meet somebody else that makes us feel okay, rather than knowing we're okay. And
I was there.
Yeah, well, that's the codependent trap that most of us were raised with. Most of our parents were codependent that stayed together, and we were raised with belief systems that put us like, when I find my other half. My favorite quote to use as a message of how bad it is from Jerry Maguire: "You complete me." Yes. None of us are incomplete, so that doesn't. It sounds romantic, but it's a trap.
Yeah, it truly is. And one of the things that I loved about your background that I was reading ahead of our conversation today is this idea of how much self-love has to do with cultivating self-respect and self-trust. Absolutely. If I am in a mode of always doing more for others than I am willing to do for myself, do I really respect myself as much as I say I respect everybody else? I probably don't.
Right.
But I'll go be there for you. Self-trust, do I trust myself to follow through? Do I trust myself to show up for me? Do I trust myself? One of the best lessons I learned, and it was probably in AA because I learned a lot of things from sponsors and such, was to be able to say no.
Right.
And not even have to say no, thank you.
Exactly. This is the thing as well. no, I mean, it's funny. Someone posted on Instagram, which asked me to comment on it. Said, "Yeah, no is a complete sentence,
Yes.
and saying no isn't about judging; it's about statement of choice.
Yeah.
And if you raise a statement of choice, because yes and no are equal in that sense,
Yeah.
it's understanding they're both equally honorable.
Yeah.
And so saying no, because a lot of us also are tied to other people's approval. Again, the codependent
Mm.
trap is that if we think we say no to somebody, they're going to disapprove of us. And if they disapprove of us, we won't feel worthy. And we won't feel
Hmm.
worthy, we won't feel loved. And it's all this de-escalating, like, sinking down into the pit of despair because we don't allow ourselves to say no out of integrity. If
Right.
it's saying something that's not working. So yeah, saying no is a powerful affirmation in a way, of honoring
Yes.
ourselves. Because one of the things to talk about trust, and for a second, I want to sidebar on
Yeah,
this trust
please,
things.
please.
I learned this lesson back in that seminar way back when. Is one of the biggest components of building self trust is watching where we give our word,
Hmm.
what we say yes to, when we make agreements. Because most of us have a bad habit of making and breaking agreements left, right, and center. Because
True.
we'll say to somebody, we'll do something, and one of the subtlest things that we tell ourselves, especially on January 1st, that we're going to do these things and we don't do them when we are breaking trust with ourselves.
Yes.
So to keep our agreements where we can see them and make them memorable, make them manageable, and make them
Hmm.
timeable, then we have more ability to build trust with ourselves and other people because they know they can count on us. Because when we say no, we know that's real. And
Yeah.
same as they do as well. So no is a valuable key in this process.
Are you working with people who are trying to have a better dating life?
That's the primary reason to meet, but there's so
Mm.
much after that.
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is part of the yes, because definitely one of the biggest challenges because people tend to look at dating to fill something they think they're missing.
Right.
Or oftentimes they'll get out of a relationship and they will spend few days or weeks mourning the last relationship and then move on without doing any transformational healing work from what happened before.
Yeah.
So the trap we fall into, yeah, is we end up this need to feel fulfilled from somebody else. Codependency
There's
once
so
again.
much pressure,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
much pressure to be coupled up.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I told you this when we first met, that people will ask me, and they always tilt their head, are you seeing anyone?
Hmm.
I'm like, stop breaking your neck over whether or not I'm, coupled up. You
Right,
know,
absolutely.
get your
Yeah.
head. My head is on. Get your head back on, because, listen, it depends on who it is. My mother, I'm sure, because she said these words, I don't want you to die alone. Well, you know what? We all die alone. I get what she's saying,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that if I've fallen and I can't get up, she's hoping that I'll have somebody there
So
to help me.
this is the thing. Actually, this brought something. Both my parents passed
Yeah.
away. My
Yeah.
dad passed in 21. My mother passed in 2012. When my mother passed away, my dad had believed he would die first because he was older than her, not a lot, but older than her, and so he was so I won't say disappointed, but he was so lost because he thought he wouldn't have to go alone. So
Right.
that thing about going alone was like that brought up a memory for me because that's true. And the last 3 years of his life, it's interesting because he died during the pandemic.
Hmm.
So he was in a nursing home, but no family could be there.
Oh
Because my
boy.
brother and I both live overseas, and there's
Yeah,
nobody with him. So ultimately, yes, we tend to die alone.
we do.
Yeah.
And when I was dating, more intentionally, more like on the sites and with the profile, like, very intentional about it.
Hmm.
When it was new, when I was newly divorced, and it was really coming from that I can't be alone thing because I really don't know how to be. Um,
Yeah.
and then all the messages come in that, it'll happen when you least expect it. And, look after you first, so that, because there was always this implied so
Yes.
that someone will find you, desirable for a
Hmm.
relationship. And I would tell you that it's only been probably in the last few years that 100% I've embodied this really beautiful sense of myself and my
Hmm.
life and my everything that would be wonderful to share with someone. And it's wonderful the way it is. Like,
Right there. Yeah.
seriously, equally feeling that way, and not secretly going, so I hope that's enough to meet somebody. Because again, the pressure is immense.
Yes.
The pressure's in you find that, yeah?
Oh yeah, I've been through it myself. I know. It's
Mm,
not just, I know from my clients. I've been there
yeah.
myself, and it is an interesting paradigm that we are caught up in, where there's something where we believe we're going to be whole when we meet somebody else,
Yeah.
and it's such a fallacy, and it's not true. The thing is, our
Mm,
work ultimately. That's why I say a lot of my clients, it's better to work with me when you're single than you are in a relationship, because when you're single, it's easy to adjust and transform. Once you're in a relationship, you're not having to conform to a certain way of being seen.
mm,
To be whole as you are, and then meet somebody when you're already fully sustaining yourself and loving yourself,
yeah.
they had to step up to where you are, which is even better.
So we have a few minutes, but we haven't taken much of a dive into, and hopefully you'll come back for further conversation. Let's take a little bit of a dive before we wrap up today with self-care. Because
Mhm.
again, in the personal development world, just like toxic positivity and all that, are you really like engaging in self-care? Like that question gets out there with a lot of pressure to it as well. What does that mean? What is good self-care?
Well, just to give you a instance of the less than ideal self care, I live in LA, and there's definitely been in LA over the last, well, not so much now, but certainly for a period of 10, 15 years, everyone's doing kale and doing the green drinks and going to yoga and all these physical things. And people think that's self care. And
Yes.
ultimately, it's only a part of the puzzle, because physicality is only part of who we are.
Hmm.
So a lot of people I know who are um, yoga masters have really messed up emotional and mental practices.
Hmm.
It's not so it isn't always it's not a complete system. Yes, eat healthy, absolutely, but also eat what makes you feel good as well. Because some
I
people eat because think they should do it, but
Yeah.
internally they're going, "I hate this, I hate this, I hate this." That's not
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So good.
And one thing I learned from my master's program, we talked about how the model they used was there was a physical, mental, and emotional levels of consciousness, awareness. They're all tied together. And on each level, there was a positive side and a negative side. So there were positive, negative physical experiences, mental experiences, emotional experiences, and then below that was the level of the self or spirit that didn't have a positive, negative polarity, because it just is. So there was something that was said about back in the day before Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig changed their systems, but back in the old days they didn't have coaching. So
Mm,
basically, people would go and they would lose 25 pounds, 30 pounds on the program. But they said that basically, statistically, they said within basically people who lost a significant amount of weight were gaining back on within 5 years and sometimes more, because they didn't do the mental and the emotional work that was tied to the physical weight in the first place to
sure,
allow it to release. And
sure.
so if we don't do the mental and emotional work, it doesn't matter how much physical health we're doing. So
Mm,
self-care on the physical level can be great. But if you're not doing self-care emotionally and mentally as well, it generally won't stick around, and you won't find yourself having alignment with that, because you'll be out of integrity.
yeah, wonderful. So what, as we wrap up for today,
Mm-hmm.
what would you tell our listeners is a first step toward greater self-love?
Um, what comes up for me right now is notice what you tell yourself. And is it one, is it accurate? Is it positive? And is it true? And if it's not any of those three, you might want to re-examine and decide what you want to do with it. So at least start with noticing what you think. And it may require writing it down.
Hmm.
So one of the practices I've had big clients go, let's on myself about what I call free form writing. Basically, is where you just vent out what you're thinking onto paper. You don't keep, it's not journaling. This is definitely a different
Hmm.
journey. You
Yeah.
basically vent out what you're upset about, what's going on. If you want to make it really effective, use your non-dominant hand, the deep,
Mm,
different consciousness of upset and stuff inside. Scroll out on the paper. Don't read it again. But when you're complete and you'll feel the energy shift when you're done, take the
mm,
paper and bundle it up, and then ideally burn it somewhere safe, like in a fireplace or whatever, so you can
yeah.
release it, get rid of it. So that's a way of releasing toxicity, negativity, unconscious stuff that isn't working for you. So that's one thing you can do right there.
Wow. That's beautiful. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you so
You,
much for being with
likewise.
me. I would love to carry this on another time down the road,
Sure.
another
Absolutely.
subject. And thank you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.